Hi Stampers, this is Susan Petty Baylor. I am an independent Stampin' Up demonstrator in Locust Grove, Virginia. And I wanted to come to you today. It's been a while since I've posted a video. I was scrolling on Facebook a couple of weeks ago and I came across a post by a hobby demonstrator named June Dunn. And she posted a card that I thought was just gorgeous. And she added a little bit of detail about how she made it, and I decided I was going to give it a try, and I liked the way they turned out, so I thought I would post a technique video for you so you can maybe give it a try as well. When I say hobby demonstrator, I should explain that not all demonstrators make videos or have websites or hold classes or anything else like that. Some hobby demonstrators just use their Stampin' Up discount for themselves. I know when I started, I was my own best customer, and that's how a lot of us got started. So anyway, I'm going to turn the camera around and we can get started on this technique. I'm not really sure what to call it, but we're going to get started. So this is the card that we're going to be making today. These were the original colors that June Dunn had used on the one that she posted on the Demonstrator Facebook page. It was Coastal Cabana, Azure Afternoon, Orchid Oasis, and Parakeet Party. And I'm going to need a bunch of Mother's Day cards, so I thought that would be the easiest thing to do. This was one of the first color combinations I tried because I liked hers so much. I wanted to give this one a try. And I made it with a 5 1/4 by 4-inch piece of Whisper White that I then mounted on a slightly bigger piece of Whisper White. And then this is Pool Party that I have it mounted on. Since I've made this one, I've done quite a few other color combinations, and I have been using a full quarter sheet, like 5 1/2 by 4 1/4 inches. That way I can trim it down and I have a piece to put on the inside to decorate with this. Since I didn't have a piece that I trimmed off, I used the embossing folder and did about 1 inch on one side of my basic white cardstock, and then I just, with a very light hand, I went over it with some Pool Party ink just to make it stand out a little bit more. This is another one that I've made. Here you can see I had a piece to trim off. This was Coastal Cabana, Highland Heather, Gorgeous Grape, and Fresh Freesia. I really like this one. This is really pretty. I have a close friend who loves purples and has a birthday coming up in a couple of weeks, and I think this is going to be her birthday card. So I did quite a few other color combinations, but stick around to the end of the video and I will show you more color combinations and other embossing folders. I actually, for this card, used the Layered Florals 3D embossing embossing folder. Put this in here and see that folder. It's really beautiful. It's a lot of different flowers, and the 3D embossing folders work the best for this particular technique because the embossing is so deep. And then let's see, the Happy Mother's Day greeting I got from Heartfelt Hellos. This was, or is, a Sale-a-Bration free with $50 purchase, and I used the Happy Mother's Day greeting. There's, I think, about 10 days more of Sale-a-Bration maybe. It ends on February 29th. So we'll use that, and I white embossed it on vellum. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to take a piece of 5.5 by 4¼ inch basic white cardstock, and the colors I'm using are going to be Moody Mauve, Bubble Bath, Greeny Apple Green, and Basic Gray. And let me just tell you very quickly where these colors came from. I went to my color coach, and I went with Moody Mauve because my niece is getting married, and I was looking to make a wedding card or maybe a shower card for her, and her colors are mauve and maybe burgundy. So I don't have a burgundy available, but I have a mauve, and so this was one of the color combinations I tried: Moody Mauve, Basic Gray, Greeny Apple Green, and then I added in Bubble Bath. So I have those 4 colors. I also tried some other color combinations from here, and but this is where I got a lot of my color combination ideas from. So I'm going to use these small blending brushes. I think the small ones work the best for this particular technique because I'm going to do kind of small blotches all over the cardstock, and these are nice and small and easy to use to get in there. These are the larger ones, which work great for other projects, but for this particular thing, I think the small blending brush is easier to use. I also used the Something Fancy dies. I used the second largest of this particular die to cut out the Happy Mother's Day greeting on here. Okay, so I'm going to start out with the lightest color. I've been doing a lot of these colors for the last several days. So under normal circumstances, I would actually probably start with the Bubble Bath. If I was only going to do one of these, I would start out with a Bubble Bath and then use the same brush with the Moody Mauve. But because I've done any number of color combinations today, I am letting the blending brushes be for just one color. If you only have a few blending brushes, you can, like I said, mix colors. You just want to start with the lightest color. And then you would take a piece of scrap paper and, in a circular motion, clean off as much of the ink from your brush as you can so that you don't transfer colors to your other ink pads. And you see, when I'm using the blending brushes, I'm either starting off the edge, or here in this case, I'm putting this little blotch in the middle, and I was just tapping off some of the excess so I don't end up with super blotchy color. And I like to put this color on in 3s or 5s, odd numbers. And there's really no rhyme or reason with how I'm putting it on. I'm just trying to scatter it around my cardstock. I find it's interesting, I find with the Moody Mauve that it tends to be more blotchy than some of the other colors. I don't know why that is, but this is actually not a Stampin' Up! blending brush. I doubt that that's the reason for the issue, but I find that around the edges, sometimes I get some excess ink, and then it gets a little blotchy. I also found with doing this gray, it's because it's so dark, I want to do this with a very light hand. I can always go in and add more, but I can't take it away once I put it on the cardstock. But there's something about pink and gray that I just think is really pretty. Again, this isn't exactly burgundy, but, well, it's what I have. The other thing is that I'm trying to, especially with the lighter colors, move my paper to an area where it's clean, my scrap paper, so that I'm not picking up color and dragging it back on to my cardstock. It wouldn't really matter with the gray because it's a dark, more saturated color, but it would matter with some of the lighter pinks and such. And I think with this one, I'm gonna do 5 spots and just do them a little bit smaller. And again, you can keep going in and adding. I'm just trying to use a light hand. Let's see, where do I want that 5th spot? I think I'll do that over here. And I might go back in and add some more mauve, since that's the main color that I want, because it's, you know, her main color for the wedding. I'm going to close up this gray. All right, let's get some Granny Apple Green. This is another really bright color, and I want this to be super light. I was also considering maybe smoky slate or something, you know, 2 colors of gray, 2 colors of pink as a possibility for this color combination. But at the same time, I like the way that green brightens up these colors. Just gives it a little bit of a pop. See, I'm going to come over in here because it's over by the mauve. If I'm going to add more mauve, I want to put it where there's not already some. Let's do a little more green over here. Really small amount. And then some more mauve. Excuse me. I had the flu while in January and a good part of February. I'm still struggling with the residual cough. Let's do just a tiny bit more green in here. Okay. All right, so I know it's looking kind of blotchy, kind of strange. I'm going to close up these ink pads before I put my fingers in them. Move my brushes and get these out of the way. And then, all right, so the next step was to spritz the back of this piece like 3 times with water. I'm just using the spritzer, it's full of water, nothing else. And then I'm going to take my embossing folder, excuse me, and with my Memento black ink, I'm going to ink the side with the Stampin' Up logo. So I'm going to open this up. Let me just move that out of the way. And with a very light hand, I'm going to tap my black Memento ink all over the inside of my embossing folder. Now you could get some of the excess black. It's going to make things look a little blotchy off the background because that's going to get on the cardstock, but it's not all going to come off. You could go in with a Q-tip and, you know, like a wet Q-tip and really clean this up. I'm not really worried about it. I'm okay with some of this being on here like that. I just don't love some of the straight lines. So I'm going to very gently drag that over again. And I probably put black ink back where I had it before, but that's okay. Okay, so that is the side that has the ink, that side. So I'm going to lay my cardstock on the other side of my enfolder, and then I'm going to close it, and I'm going to hold on to it and not let it move. And you can kind of see how it's going to come out. So I'm going to go take this over to my Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine and run it through. As a reminder, when you're using, if you have a Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine with a 3D embossing folder, you're going to want to use your number 1 base plate and your number 4 dark gray 3D embossing plate. And then you open it up, and this is what you get. I'm just going to take a damp paper towel and wipe off the excess. If I was doing this, I would just take this to the sink and run it under some water and let it dry. But for now, I just want to get the excess off, and I'll rinse it off when I'm finished. You don't want to forget to rinse it. The last thing you want to do is forget to do that and be using your embossing folder and getting black ink on a project that you didn't want. So I'm going to use my heat tool, and I'm going to dry this. It's pretty dry. You can just let this set aside for, I don't know, 10-15 minutes and let it dry on its own. But because of the video, I'm going to go ahead and hit it with a heat tool and make sure that it's good and dry. That's pretty good. If you have an embossing tool that has a high or a low temperature, I would probably put it on low. I have an older Stampin' Up! Embossing tool that's one either on or off. And I'm going to go over this with my embossing buddy. Use whatever embossing tool you have and just go over it. And this is going to help absorb any excess moisture in case you didn't dry it completely enough. It's also going to absorb the oils from your skin and what have you. So that you don't get embossing powder where you don't want it. Okay, so you want to take your Versamark and very gently drag it over the embossing. I found if I pat it, I get more Versamark in the background where I don't want it. So with a very light hand, I'm just going over with the Versamark. And then I'm going to take my white embossing powder. And I'm going to sprinkle this on very generously. Now when I did this the first many times, I was patting my embossing powder, or I'm sorry, my Versamark pad over top of my embossed piece, and no matter how much of a light hand I used, I always seemed to get Versamark and then subsequently embossing powder on the background. I didn't want it. And you can go over, if there's some place that you do have some excess, you can go in with a brush and dab that away. I have that larger brush. I also have a smaller brush that I like to use and just get some of the excess. I don't worry about too much getting excess, but if I see anything obvious that I can get easily, I'll go through and do that. Okay. And I guess I should also, I keep my embossing powders in some Rubbermaid containers, and I just used a command clip, and I have a plastic spoon that's dedicated to a particular color, and I also have at least one of these anti-desiccant, it's called a pillow pack, on the inside, just to help absorb any excess moisture that might get in there, and it keeps my embossing powder pretty nice. Okay, so now I'm going to come back in here with my heat tool and emboss this piece. It really helps to let your embossing tool heat up for a few seconds, get it nice and hot. That will help to cut down on warping, especially if you're going to emboss on vellum. But even with embossing on cardstock, it will still warp a bit, and if you hit the front and the back with the heat, that usually helps to, keep things fairly flat. Okay, so this is what it looks like when it's finished. There's not, oh, I didn't emboss. Let me, I rubbed some of that off. I am gonna put a little bit more embossing powder on that and hit it with the heat tool again. See if I can fix that. And let's see, where is that little brush? Here we go. I just have this one line in here that I don't like. Okay, let's try that again. Okay, that's better. Now I got it all melted. It's always a good idea when you're heat embossing to have a really strong light, so that either while you're embossing or immediately after, when you think you're finished, you want to take it and just kind of rotate it under the light. And you can see that when it's fully heated, it's turned shiny, and if there's an area that you missed, it would still look dull and powdery. Okay, so that's pretty dry. Oh, hell. Okay, I'm going to put a clean piece of paper in here. Try to get some of this stuff out of the way. Oops. Okay. So here we have our finished piece. And I'm going to take a piece of vellum. Oh, I got some ink on there. So I'll work over on this side. When you're going to heat emboss with vellum, you want to make sure that you use your anti-static tool on the vellum. Be very generous with it because vellum tends to be very staticky. And then you get embossing powder all over the place where you don't want it. Okay, and some Versamark ink. Let me turn this that way. And I'm not pressing hard. I'm just holding it here for a few seconds to give that ink a chance to transfer. If I press too hard, my letters are gonna smush. And let me just get my white embossing powder again. And you wanna definitely have your heat tool hot before you bring it to the vellum. That will really help prevent, oops, that's a little wasn't very good. I wonder, I might have to redo this. Let's see. I'm gonna try inking this up again, and maybe I can cut that, since I'm cutting it out with a die. I think I'm gonna, whoops, did I use my embossing buddy on this part? I don't think I did. I want to be super generous. Okay. And then I'm going to stamp this a little over to the side. Hopefully this is a better impression. And I'm giving myself enough room to cut it out. All right. Oops. I'm going to emboss both of these, but you can see that Ever got a much better impression on this one than it did here. So we'll see how that goes. All right, I'm going to heat this up, get it embossed. I do apologize for all the shadows. I still don't have the proper lighting in here. One of these days, my husband's gonna come through for me. All right, you can see that the Ever is not really legible, but this one came out fairly well. So I am going to center, well, let me just take this off so I can actually see what I'm doing. I'm going to center this die. I think I still have a little ink, but it's not too bad. Let me get that straight. I'll tape that down with some washi tape, and I'm going to run this through my Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine. Oops, I bumped that. Okay, that looks straight, so I will be back momentarily. Okay. All right, that actually turned out pretty well. All right, and I told you about the Heartfelt Hellos Happy Mother's Day stamp. But this particular one, Here's to Beautiful Beginnings and Happily Ever After. This comes from Something Fancy. And this is on page 34 of the 2023-2024 annual catalog. You can see I use this one quite a lot. I didn't forget your birthday. I'm just stretching out the celebration. I've had quite a few late birthday cards this year. All right. I'll put this aside, and I have a 11.5 by 5.5 piece of cardstock scored at 4 1/4, folding it with the mountain side of the embossed, I'm sorry, the mountain part of the score on the inside. And then I'm just gonna match up the ends, make sure that that's nice and flat. So it could be either the mauve or it could be basic gray. That's kind of pretty too. But I think I like the mauve, especially if I use this for my niece. Okay. All right, so I'm going to bring in my paper trimmer, and as you could see from these, I like to cut this piece down a bit and then have a white layer underneath. I think it just makes the white embossing pop. And I'm going to do the same thing with this. I'm thinking this is a 5 1/4 by 4 inch piece. So I'm going to cut this down to 5 1/8 by 3 7/8, just 1/8 of an inch less than this layer. And I usually will write this down because I don't want to cut it wrong. All right, so I want 1/8 of an inch less than 4. So that's going to be this first long line to the right of the 4. So that's going to be 3 7/8. And then I want this to be 1/8 of an inch less. Sorry, this piece is what I'm talking about. It's going to be 1/8 of an inch smaller than this. So this is 5 1/2. I want 5 1/8. And then I get 1/8 of an inch of white all the way around. All right, so I'm going to take a look at this, and I think I'm going to I'll cut that down to 5 1/8. And anytime that you're cutting embossed cardstock, flip it over and cut it on the back side, and you'll have less problems cutting it. If you cut it on this side, the trimmer blade often will get caught on the pieces that are sticking up. Okay, so I'm going to set this aside, and then I think I'll take, I might take a little off of both sides. So this needs to be 3 7/8. So I have 3/8 that I need to take off. I'm going to take 1/8 off of this side. And then I'm going to cut this down to 3 7/8, so that'll be another 1/4 of an inch on this side, just because of all the dark there. Although I really like, this is always hard for me, trying to figure out where I want to cut this. So if I cut this here, yeah, let's just, whoops, listen to what you're doing. Okay, we're going to cut this at 3 7/8. And I'm going to save this piece and this piece to use on the inside. All right. Now I'm going to mount this on the white. If you have embossed cardstock, or maybe cardstock that you've watercolored, you can be very generous with your glue. This still feels gritty. I think I still missed some places with embossing. Okay. Then, whoops. Maybe I'm going to take a piece of 3 3/4 by 5, and I'm going to use this on the inside. So we can either do, we can use this piece up the side, which is not cut very straight, or I can use this piece across the bottom. Maybe I'll use that piece across the bottom. It's straighter, it's a little thicker because I made 1 cut instead of 2. And I am going to just lay this across the bottom. I think I'll bring it all the way down to the bottom edge. Scoot that over. That's one of the things I love about liquid glue, is you have a little wiggle room. And then just take a scissors, and on the back side, trim it off. Okay, whoops. All right, and then I'm just going to adhere this. Hold on 1 second, that looks like it got a little mushed along the edge. That looks better. And we'll just put some liquid glue on this. And we'll center that. I'm looking for relatively equal space, top, bottom, and side. Okay. And then I have, here is To Beautiful Beginnings and Happily Ever After. Oh, here's the one I just did. That turned out the best. And I'm going to be careful when you're adhering vellum to cardstock. It is very difficult to put any kind of glue on the back of vellum and not have it show through. So I am going to take some glue dots. I'm going to stick my head in here. And I'm trying to put it, I'm kind of smushing. Is that a technical term? I am smushing the glue dot and putting it behind the white embossing so that it doesn't show through. I find you don't need to, glue this down super well. I'm sorry, I think I keep hitting my phone with my head. I'm trying to get my head in here without it being in the camera, and so I can see what I'm doing. I could try this. So I'm just laying that on there. Can you see that? There's a couple of glue dots there, here. Could probably put some under bottom and the top grading. Oops, let me just find another glue dot. You want to try to get it right behind the embossing. White embossing usually will block the glue from being seen. There are a couple other tricks to putting adhesive on vellum, but this is the one I'm going to use today. So let's decide where we're going to put this. I could put it down here, cover up some of that gray blotchiness. I think maybe I'll do that. And then, there's no adhesive to be seen. Can you see that? No adhesive. So I think I like that there. All right. So again, that was, let's see, Moody Mauve, Bubble Bath, Granny Apple Green, and Basic Gray. I think that's actually a really pretty card, and it is not that difficult. As far as the envelope goes, I could use one of these pieces on the envelope, but what I did was I used the embossing folder on the flap. When you're using a 3D embossing folder on the envelopes, it's a lighter weight cardstock than the regular basic white, and so usually what I do is either put a piece of wax paper or copy paper between the envelope flap and the embossing folder, just to give it a little more body. If you emboss with a 3D embossing folder on the envelope flap, it is not unusual for the cardstock to split. So that's a way to protect it. So I think that turned out really pretty. I think that might be either the shower card or the wedding card. All right, let me show you some of the other color combinations. Now this is the same embossing folder. This is the these are all using the Layered Florals 3D embossing folder. I will show you these, and then I have some other ones that I used different embossing folders on, just experimenting. This was a color challenge, these colors. These are more pastel-y. These were Parakeet Party, Tahitian Tide, Fresh Freesia, and Highland Heather. And it's mounted on Tahitian Tide. This one is Azure Afternoon. It's also mounted on Azure Afternoon. Crushed Curry, Calypso, Coral, and Pool Party. Again, I got these color combinations from Color Coach. This one is Berry Burst, Melon Mambo, Tahitian Tide, and Granny Apple Green, also mounted on Tahitian Tide. And I just used a partial piece of, I think it was Melon Mambo, around the edges, and then a strip that I cut from the edge on the inside. Now these are some other pieces that I was experimenting with, other 3D folders that I thought were interesting. This one is the Leaf Fall 3D embossing folder, and I used, hold on, this was Moody Mauve, Copper Clay, Pebble Path, and Cajun Craze. I thought they were kind of fall colors and pretty. I think I prefer an embossing folder that would cover the entire piece, but at the same time I'm gonna trim this down, probably off of this side, and then maybe I'll put my greeting up here and that will be covered up. So I think that'll be okay, but a pretty color combination. This one was using the Distressed Tile, also 3D embossing folder. And let's see, I used Moody Mauve, Granny Apple Green, Bubble Bath, and Blackberry Bliss. Just a little different look. This could be fun. And you remember, you don't have to use the entire piece on your card. Cut this down and use just a small amount, half a piece, and have, you know, half on one card, half on another card. Have it as an accent piece. Lots of different things to do. This one is using the Fern 3D embossing folder. I thought this turned out really pretty. This is Lucky Limeade Garden Green, Gorgeous Grape, and Granny Apple Green. Again, I think really pretty fall colors. This is the Painted Posies embossing folder. I did 2 of these. This one was using Moody Mauve, Copper Clay, Pebbled Path, and Cajun Craze. I was trying to find color combinations that I liked for a wedding card. And then this one is, these are these colors, except I added in Flirty Flamingo and took out the Blackberry Bliss. I switched out Flirty Flamingo and Blackberry Bliss, but same embossing folder. And all the colors are the same except for the Blackberry Bliss and the Flirty Flamingo. Both pretty. I don't think, I guess I wouldn't mind this one for a shower card, maybe for my niece. And then, all right, those were all those. And then I had one other card. So I used the Layered Florals 3D embossing folder, and I was playing around with the sponge daubers, and I used just a whole bunch of different colors. You know, if you don't have the blending brushes, you could also do something like that. I mean, this is beautiful, just white without color, but I thought this was fun too, and I did a bunch of different colors. This is Gorgeous Grape, this is Fresh Freesia, Highland Heather, we have some Daffodil, Petal Pink, Coastal Cabana, Pool Party, there's some Soft Seafoam, and I believe these bigger flowers are Flirty Flamingo. So lots of different colors. I thought it was a fun, springy Mother's Day card. I haven't finished the inside yet. I just used a circle die to cut out the Happy Mother's Day, so it's the same Happy Mother's Day that I used on this card, just with a different die to cut it out. And then I showed you this one before, and let's see. This is using the Wanted to Say dies. I used the Happy Birthday in the Gorgeous Grape, and then the Shadow in with the Vellum. It just helps to kind of ground the words so that they're a little bit more visible. It just makes it just kind of, it doesn't really mask the background, it just helps to make it a little more subtle. Helps that to stand out more. So okay, so this is it. All these, I had so much fun playing around with all these different color combinations and embossing folders. So I think this is, I'll use this for my niece. I like the way that turned out. And I will emboss a whole bunch more envelopes, and then I have all these other ones with the other embossing folders. So I hope you give this a try. Play around with it. It was really a lot of fun. It's a little messy, but fun. Okay, so happy stamping.